the top news story in the country is unequivocally Kevin McCarthy being ousted as Speaker of the House. On Tuesday, he was voted out in a 216 to 210 vote, with 8 far-right Republicans joining all of the Democrats. So those 8 GOP members include, or are led by, Matt Gaetz, obviously, a group of, I guess, what would be best described, Sachs, as Tea Party-esque members of the GOP contingent. They care mostly about spending and curtailing spending. Am I correct,
Well,
Sachs?
don't forget all the Democrats.
Well, yeah, I'm putting the Democrats on. We're already counting them. I'm just talking about the 8 who made this tip over.
The media is trying to portray them as these far right, wingers. And I don't think you can necessarily say that, because I don't think Nancy Mace fits in that group. I think she does care about spending, but she's not
Was it
this
far
like
right
MAGA.
to care about spending? I mean, far right to me would be
Well,
more
that's
MAGA.
exactly right. I mean, anything that the media doesn't like, they label far right. But I think, Nancy Mace is a good example of somebody who is very concerned about spending discipline, but is not like a MAGA type Republican.
But is and just to just refine this one more time before I keep going, those 8 the common thread would be control spending. We have out of control spending is the reason they're voting a no vote for Kevin McCarthy.
I think there were a couple other pieces of this. If you listen to Nancy Mace and some of the other people that were involved here, a lot of the issue comes down to trust. They felt like they could no longer trust Kevin McCarthy. They felt like the things that he had told them in private were not matching up with the things that he would then later do, or that he would say in public, or that he would tell the Biden administration. So I think
their main issues were...
Well, I think there's a couple. One was on spending. He had promised that he would stop doing these giant omnibus spending bills where everything would be lumped into one bill. You get like 24 hours to read it, and then you got to vote up or down on whether you pass this giant spending bill or shut down the government. Everyone feels forced to vote for it. He had promised to do single subject spending bills.
So military, education, welfare, whatever.
Yeah, that goes through a regular budget process. So they felt like he had broke his promise on that. I think also on the issue of Ukraine, there were some trust issues there, because what he was telling Republicans in private was not what he was telling the Biden administration in private, where he was telling the Biden administration, don't worry, we're going to get the Ukraine funding through. But then he was sounding different notes with various Republicans. And I think his true feelings on the matter came out in this press conference he did after he was ousted, in which he goes on this long rant about how Putin's the second coming of Adolf Hitler. And if we don't stop him now, he's going to be, marching into Paris. And I mean, it was sort of this like unhinged second grade American history style a view of the war, which regardless of what your view is on it, I think it expressed his true feelings on the matter, which is that when push came to shove, he's more hawkish than Joe Biden on the issue of Ukraine. He feels that Biden has not done enough. It's safe to say that that position is now very out of step with the Republican caucus. So he is pushing a view on Ukraine that is now very out of step. Moreover, I think that if he had just acted as an honest broker on the issue, which is to say, listen, I'm just going to represent the views of my caucus is divided on the issue, I'm just going to let them have an up or down vote on it, then I think he could have survived on that issue. But instead, again, I think he was trying to manipulate things in a direction of continuing Ukraine funding, regardless of the views of his caucus.
Gaetz wants to end CR's continuing resolutions. Those extend the funding deadline from October 1st to the holidays, claiming this buys Congress time to lump all those individual farm promotion bills into the omnibus bill, as you correctly pointed out. Gaetz wants to end that practice and return to regular order, passage of individual annual spending bills, not the omnibus.
The context that I think is important, that I think is that the American public should understand is, how is this actually supposed to work so that we don't normalize what these CRs are? So the way that it's supposed to work is that Congress is authorized by law to create 12 spending bills a year. And each of those bills have to map to the large parts of the government. So there's a military bill, there's an education bill, there's a HHS bill, et cetera, et cetera. And those are supposed to be negotiated on the House floor and passed. The Senate is allowed to do a version of the same. If those two things are different, meaning the Senate doesn't take the House bill and creates their own, the law says that you have to create what's called a conference, and a group of people, half senators and half Congress people, sit in a room, hash out and mediate a resolution, and that is what goes to the president's desk to be signed. That's how it used to be done. But about a decade ago, all of that broke down. And now what happens is you have this thing that Sachs mentioned, which is called the CR, which is essentially a backdoor. It's this release valve that is supposed to be a in emergency break glass type measure that has become fundamentally normalized. And I think what's important to call out is what happened here isn't getting the just attention because it's being characterized on party lines and not actually being characterized with how America is legally supposed to work as defined in the Constitution. So the Congress is supposed to pass 12 spending bills a year. It's then supposed to get negotiated or approved by the Senate, and then it should go to the president. When you override that with these continuing resolutions, this is the issue that Freeberg's been talking about. You balloon the deficit, you balloon the debt, you have all kinds of pork barrel spending, there's zero accountability, the bullets cost $6,000, the umbrella holders cost $15,000. All of this nonsense that just brings us closer and closer to some sort of default or economic contagion. So I actually look at this issue not as Republican versus Democrat, the far right wing. I think that's misguided interpretation by the mainstream media. I think what this is the first chance in a while where you're not allowed to pass a continuing resolution, where you will have to propose 12 bills the way the law says you're supposed to. And what that'll mean is that you'll have to negotiate a compromise to get those 12 bills passed. Now, what's crazy is the Senate actually has 6 of those bills on their desk and they haven't even negotiated it. And I think the reason is because they know that the CR is always in the offing. But if this continuing resolution is not allowed because you fired the speaker, then they'll have to negotiate those bills. And part of what McCarthy did to get elected was say, we will return to the law and not use the in emergency break glass. And I think that's it's not understood well, I think, by Americans as that is the actual process. We haven't been doing it for a decade. And I'm not a fan of Gates, but I'm glad that somebody did this because somebody has to draw a line in the sand. The Republicans and Democrats equally have been responsible for breaking the way the American government spends money. And so this is the best way to fix it.
Freeberg, you agree with what's gone down here and that that this is worth shutting the government down, et cetera? Or do you think this is like where to make the stand? Because you've been very pro controlling spending, as have I. And so do you think that this is the best way to do it, I guess?
It's more about the United States is facing a fiscal emergency. National debt reported by the Treasury Department increased by $275 billion in a one-day report yesterday. $275 billion in a day. The entire TARP program during 2008 was $400 billion. That's how out of control our fiscal condition is. And this is a function of rising rates, a function of spending. And, you know, as we talked about many times over, there's an arithmetic to this that at some point it becomes ever escalating until you step in and do something dramatic about it. So I'm hopeful. And I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric. You can watch all the news channels and see a lot of these Congress people get on camera and talk about different things. I think we're seeing more frequently now people talking about the fiscal crisis that the US is facing. And that this action provides a mechanism, as Chamath points out, for forcing everyone to the table to figure out how do we reduce the impact? How do we chart a path to a solution? Because right now, if you asked anyone in Congress, what's the strategic plan here? There is not going to be an answer from anyone. Everyone's got a different point of view and everyone's fighting over the deck chairs on the Titanic. And we've got a more significant problem. We're hitting an iceberg. So yeah, I'm hopeful that this causes hopefully a turning point in the never-ending spending spree where everyone gets elected and everyone promises to the folks that they're representing and the folks that funded their political campaigns some amount of money back out from the government and everyone gets that free money. And at some point, something's got to turn around or the whole thing kind of goes down. So hopefully this is that moment. I don't know.
Sachs, do you think that this
by the way, if the government shut down for weeks and months to try and figure this out and for everyone to get aligned with here's the long-range strategic plan presented to the American people on how we prevent the U.S. from either inflation or bankruptcy, then I think everyone will feel like it was worth it.